But what we can do is going forward, try to come up with a process that gives people an opportunity. The truth is, it's only a fraction of the people who come through will have a credible fear of persecution under the asylum laws or be a victim of human trafficking. But what we try to do is figure a way using the current law to give them an opportunity, because right now, most of them don't even have that opportunity because either they don't want it or because they just have to wait so long. So we're trying to work with that, but you make an excellent point. No one expects a 6-year-old to represent themselves in court. That means they, but you make good points.
Let me just add one more thing. When I saw the president's request, 40, I thought the $35 million that he's asking for the administrative judges was too little. But again, we went with the president's request. We did not make this up. We went with what President Barack Obama asked for. I thought it should be higher, but that's what it is. I think you had some numbers that an average immigration judge is able to progress 1,500 cases per year, the 2 or 3 that you mentioned. But the courts, the judges in the busiest courts can process up to 5,000, just like the federal district judges here handle a lot more cases than they do in Michigan and other places. So if we go at those numbers, they will be able to process 60,000 to 200,000 expedited hearings for the kids, with attorneys and whatever they want to have, president advocates, parents, and all that. My personal thing, we went with the president because that's what he asked, and we assume that he asked the Office of Immigration Review, which is the ones in charge of the judges. So I went with that. My personal thought that it should have been higher, but that's the number what we came up with because President Obama, asking all his experts, said this is what we need. Personally, it should be more, but that's what we came up with that number.
But what you're doing here is what good lawmaking, good government's all about. And I don't want to just give you all, the blue ribbon, but you've earned your titles by representing the border region that needs representation because it's two-sided. It's humanitarian, but it's also very much border security. We have border surges going on right now, Texas surge through DPS. What people don't understand either, there's tremendous cooperation between Border Patrol, Texas DPS, Rio Grande City PD, and whatever law enforcement's involved. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it in circumstances where they are children and they are ladies and families. But when people forget, there's a lot of people coming across who are still the undocumented immigrant who seems edgy, who I've actually asked and saying, where are you from? And they respond to you in a very strong voice, in a very deliberate manner where it gives you an impression like they're upset at something. I didn't do anything to them, neither did this country, but we accept them. But by your legislation, it provides a very, very efficient way to handle it that didn't exist. And if anybody wants to point what good government's about, you can look at these 2 gentlemen here, Senator Cornyn and Congressman Cuellar. That's what good government's about. And I encourage you to stay on that pathway because solutions are what needed at the border.
Some folks get the impression that, they make it across that the river is the finish line. Well, it's not the finish line. They don't stop here. They're going to Pennsylvania. They're dispersing just as drugs disperse throughout the rest of the country. So this isn't a problem for those folks down there in South Texas. This is a problem for everybody in this country, and they need to understand. I hope that message will get across. The final thing I want to just share with you is that I received a call from a gentleman yesterday who had talked to our Economic Development Corporation, he talked to our chamber, and he still wasn't satisfied and wanted to talk to me about investing in our community. He was going to invest in our community and bring business to the community, but he's worried about doing that because he heard that somebody pulled a permit for a processing facility for these kids in the community and was concerned about the impact that could have on business and trade, and whether or not there was going to be flood problems in our community. I don't believe that will happen. I don't believe that commerce should be chilled by this. It's not a security issue. It's an important issue, but it's not a security issue. But the perception for some people is that it is. And if it really is getting out there and killing investment in our communities, that's killing jobs, and it's, there's a larger impact here. And I didn't really fully appreciate it until I received this call from this man that wants to start a business in my town. So I hope that we can understand that this is also an issue that impacts our local economies. And I hope, and that's an important message, I hope that we can convey as well. So thank you very much.
I agree with the senator that, you know, as a country, we export 40% of everything we produce as a country to Latin America. But we don't pay attention to Latin America, their own backyards. Once in a while, we wake up, like in the 1980s, where we said, oh, the Sandinistas are there, so let's send arms and let's do this. And then we spend a little bit of money and then we forget about Latin America. I think the same thing's happening in our own backyards, that we have to, quite honestly, we gotta have something, Plan Colombia, Plan Merida. And some people say, well, where are you gonna spend money over there? I've always said this: if you're gonna play football, we both the senator have been saying, and even Secretary Johnson is saying this also, if you're gonna play football, you wanna play football at the 1 yard line, like we're doing here at the US border, or at the 20-yard line. And I think the low investment that we do out there will probably save us a lot of money. Like they say, spend $1 here, you're gonna spend much more money later. So the due process, even though some people say it's not, it's there. We don't change anything under the law, except for those two things that I mentioned. And more importantly, if anybody, and you made a good point, I agree with you. President Obama had 40 judges, we put 40 judges, should be more, but nevertheless, we presented something. If somebody has a better idea, I want to hear it. But if people are saying no, 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 and this crisis is going on and some of our pay local and all that, what are we supposed to do? We're running out of time. We literally are running out of time in Washington. So if somebody has a better idea, we want to hear it. Or make amendments. Take the legislation and make amendments.
Hi, my name is John Michael Torres, Mission resident, and also member of, and I work for La Unión del Pueblo Entero, which we are an outshoot of the United Farm Workers. And there's a number of concerns in the legislation as it's written right now that we hope that we will have the opportunity to discuss at length. And you know, since the time is brief right now, I'll just mention one of the big concerns is that law enforcement has the duty to make a case against somebody. And the way that this legislation is written, it would change the situation of the Border Patrol agent to what they currently do right now with Mexican minors, which is they have a lot of the decision making on whether the very critical decision making on whether that person is going to have the chance to proceed with their due process. And the Department of State is recognized in 2008 that minors have limited capacity to recognize themselves as victims, even though they know that there's been bad things that have happened to them. Don't see themselves as being the victim or maybe they justify it as adults, things that adults do, different things like that, and oftentimes don't speak up until days later. And so when in the case of minors from Central America, once they've gained a little bit of trust in the person that they're talking with, the representative of HHS, for example, and at that point start to see themselves as a victim and having these rights under the law. As it is right now, we give a lot of the decision-making authority to the Border Patrol agent that's seeing them at that moment, and a lot of these kids don't have the trust in law enforcement right away. It takes a while to gain that trust. And we've also seen cases where adults who do see themselves as victims and have asked for a hearing in front of the judge are denied that by Border Patrol. Specifically, one case, a young mother from Mexico, from Reynosa, her name is Laura S. Her full name is not given for privacy reasons, but Laura S. She was detained by Border Patrol, and she told Border Patrol a number of times that if she was deported, that her ex was going to kill her. She was not given a hearing in front of a judge. She was deported. Within a week, her body was found in a burned car in Reynosa. This is a situation where Border Patrol could have very much given her that hearing in front of the judge. And that was a case where she recognized that she was a victim. Now, many of the minors who are in this situation who are victims of human trafficking are instructed by the people that that have control over them to not talk to the Border Patrol or to ask for, speaking of Mexican minors, to ask for the removal from the country, and then they go right back into the service of the people who are there, who are actually the actual criminals in this case. So the bill is those provisions in the bill are very dangerous for the safety of these children, and would guarantee that many of them go back into the hands of people who are abusing them. So, I mean, that's one of the biggest concerns that we have with the legislation.
The landowners of South Texas applaud your leadership. We applaud you coming together and sending a signal, because this is a signal. This bill is a signal. It's a deterrent. And by changing the loophole, you're sending a signal to the cartel. And I think this will also provide relief for the landowner. And remember, the checkpoint counties, when we're talking about stone garden funds, because what has happened over this last 6 weeks, it's taken the agents out of the field. Only 16% of agents are in the field in Brooks County. And it's pushed all processing and unaccompanied minors. So this bill will help in so many ways. And I applaud you. We've developed a wonderful relationship with you over this past 8 years with both of you, and we appreciate your leadership. Thank you so much.
We'll hopefully move this next week. We don't know what's going to happen because there's two extremes. On one side is saying we're not going to put a single penny. All we want is changes to the law, not a single penny. Then there's some people on the other side that are saying just the money and don't change a single word. Or you can put money and then it just keeps adding. And next year we'll talk about $20 billion instead of 3.7 or whatever amount. So we got two extremes, and what we were just trying to do is trying to come to the middle and work out something that hopefully will address this humanitarian crisis with homeland security issues. So thank you so much for being here.
Last questions from the media at the podium. So with that
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm wondering how the deportation of thousands of children accords with human rights law, with child welfare law, and with the historic right of sanctuary and asylum. All of those things are embodied in hundreds of international laws that have been laid out several times in several different international treaties with the United Nations. And I'm wondering how you think that that accords with the human rights of children, in particular, child welfare. It seems to me that the welfare of children is not something that requires citizenship or has any respect for national boundaries. And it seems to me an unspeakable treachery to send children back to countries to an uncertain fate. And the second part of my question is that I think that you would consider it unseemly at best to associate children, desperate, poor children, with prostitution and drug trafficking without really a shred of evidence other than assertion. I think it's shameful, and I think that you need to explain that to the press and to the community.
Sure. Be happy. Are you with the media?
I am the media.
Okay,
Yes, I
good.
am.
Let me just say this. The information we've gotten are from federal agents that do this day to day, every single day. So this is our brave men and women that some of them have lost their lives, like Mr. Zapata. It was Ryan Zapata, folks that have lost their lives in those countries. They have dealt with the drug organizations, and the drug organizations have taken advantage of kids, of women, of men, other folks. And this is, again, the information that we got, and some of them, quite honestly, from some the sources, not only from here, from the U.S., but people that actually work over there. What I just got back from Guatemala and Honduras, the information that I used is information for our men and women that work for the State Department, USAID, all the federal agents that work up there, so we're basing that. Now, going back to what you said, the best interest of the children is what we have to do. we have to keep in mind, and we want to do that. But we have to do this, at least as a congressman. I'm not a congressman of Honduras or El Salvador or somewhere else. I only work here in the U.S. That's it. So we have to do and give the children the protection, due process under the law. Asylum under the current law, credible fear under the current law, the human trafficking under the 2008 law that we have. So we treat everybody under the law. We don't suggest to change any of the protections. We're just trying to do due process under the current law that we have right now. Now, the last thing is, when you have the president of Honduras, and the first lady that was actually here recently, and you have the president of Guatemala, and they say, we want our kids back. We want our kids back, but we need help from the U.S. so we can have the capacity to take care of the kids safely, number one, and number two, we need help in our countries. So who are we to say where the children should stay? But again, the old presidents are saying we want them back. So we're going to work with the countries, but we're going to still follow the laws that we have under the United States, which are the current asylum, current credible fear, and victim of sex trafficking. Everything stays the same.
Before we turn to the next question, let me just add briefly, what we're trying to do is restore an orderly, lawful system of people who want to come to the United States. This is the most generous country in the world when it comes to naturalizing people from other countries. But what we see, what happens when it operates outside of the law, that it's in the hands of the cartels who care nothing about people. They care nothing about the children. They're commodities, a way to make money. They're evil, despicable people taking advantage of your children. And so what we need to do is try to restore this to a lawful, orderly process, because otherwise we're going to continue to see more children victimized, and none of us want to see that. Yes, sir.
John, earlier when you asked your question, did they answer it properly? Did you get the answer?
No. In response to my question, the congressman said that there was going to be the added layer of the Mexican consulate to screen people for being victims of these types of crimes. But in reality, it takes a number of days, months, and sometimes up to years before a qualified expert identifies somebody as being victims of crimes. And putting somebody in front of a stranger at the Mexican consulate, asking them the same questions that the Border Patrol, or similar questions that the Border Patrol have asked, is not going to really be an extra layer of protection.
I know you guys work very closely with the people who are actually talking about these migrants. Do you think congressmen, do you think that the officials, are they kind of touched with the situation on the ground?
They're not meeting with child advocates. They're not meeting with the lawyers that are working with these kids. If they were, then they'd be proposing solutions that are coming from the experts on this issue, rather than proposing solutions that would quickly try to sweep the problem under the rug.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is Hector Guzman Lopez. I'm the coordinator for the Fuerza del Valle Worker Center. We work with immigrant workers here to obtain worker justice when labor laws are violated. What we understand from the proposals here is that they want to amend the 2008 trafficking law that was passed back in 2008. Essentially, they want to make it easier to deport children from Central America. They want to make them on the same level as Canadians and Mexican children. And what that's going to happen is, let's say this passes, so they can start deporting all these children. And what's the consequences? What organizations like ours, like mine, the one I work for, and other human rights organizations here throughout in the valley and throughout the border of fear, is that once this happens, families are not going to start turning themselves in like they are right now. They cross the border, they turn themselves in because they don't want to walk anymore. They just want to go with the rest of their family. What's really going to happen, and what we're scared of, is that people are going to start crossing the brush, like many workers do already. And in a couple of years, in a year, 2 years, whenever this passes, if it passes, we might have a worse human rights catastrophe where we have hundreds of kids dying in the brush. That is going to be really scary. It's going to be on the hands of Congress people, congressmen like these that are proposing such legislation.
What would you say would be a better alternative?
Definitely follow international conventions, treat refugees as refugees, analyze the situation, and unify families. A lot of kids, it's another point, right? They're saying that these countries want these children back. I say, who wants them back, the president or their family? Because their family's over here. A lot of these kids have their parents working in the cities here in the U.S., helping the U.S. economy recover. They're in New York, they're in Chicago, they're in Houston, you name it, even in the Valley. Really, who wants these kids back? The president or the family?
Niños refugiados deben ser ayudados. No deportados. Niños refugiados deben ser ayudados. No deportados. Humane legislation. Not deportation. 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 Humane legislation. Not deportation.
And we have a speaker with us, Mary Scully, who's an activist. I asked her a question before the break, and we're going to let her respond to that question. This being humane and doing these humanitarian things, everybody has great motives for this kind of stuff, and I'm all for that. My question is, you're not paying for all this, and there's a lot of Americans who don't feel the way you are, and they are going to have to pay for this. How is that humane, and how is that appropriate to take money from other people who are not even interested in this issue and force them to pay for something that you're interested in?
Well, they're appropriating billions. How many billions is it now for militarizing the border?
But all those billions still come from taxpayers.
Yes, if they stopped militarizing the border and instead invested in human welfare and in human rights, they would have plenty of money. People calculate this. I see this a lot on social media. People calculate the cost of wars and the cost of the border wall and then they calculate how much that would be invested in a school child or improving education or improving health care or whatever. And the economy is enormously to the advantage of social services and human rights.
I have one question before we get. John Lewis, the fabled civil rights leader, tweeted the other day, "Our doors are open." My question, and we have about a minute left, is my takeaway from that and from the opposition to ratcheting down people who come into the country, get caught up in the system is they do not seem to want this ever to stop. If your reason for allowing someone into the country is they have a terrible home life, however that's defined, violence, a sad economy, that's most of the world. So are you saying that you are of a mind to allow anybody who can get here and plead this to be here?
Well,
where does it stop, in other words?
Yes, I blog frequently on immigration, and not just on the Texas-Mexican border, or the U.S.-Mexican border, but also about immigration from Africa and Syria and the Middle East to Europe, from Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, and those countries to Australia. There's certain routes that immigrants
We're almost
take.
out of time, though.
And
is there no cap to the number of people who you would allow in?
I believe in open borders.
But if you
That's what I
believe in
thought.
open
So
borders.
you would not stop anyone ever showing up and saying, "I want to be here."
And with our current social welfare system, everyone would come, wouldn't they?
Our current welfare system stinks, by the way. Anybody,
Why
So why do they come here for it?
they don't come here for social
They
welfare.
come here for aid to dependent children, for WIC, they come here for the benefits that are freely available.
You know, you can get a government check if your kid has ADHD.
Well, you know something? If you're starving and if your kid is hungry, then I think come here and get help. But that's the only place.
I will say
I'm
this,
not one of-
Mary Scully is the only person in I won't tell you how long in the air, who has ever said, "Yes, I believe in borders." Everybody else
say-
obscures it, they never admit to
No,
it.
I say open the borders, tear down the walls,
And
close
everybody-
down the immigration
Everybody jump
jails.
in the lifeboats and we all drown together.
No.
America
I'm
is the
going to
lifeboat
South
of the world.
Africa.
I believe an injury to one is an injury to all. That we have a common humanity.
And Mary, if you were paying it, I'd be all for it, but since I'm paying for it, then I'm not all for it.
You're listening to 710 KURE, that's Mary Scully, MaryScullyReports.com, live from Mission City Hall. More in the next hour.